Okay, Minister, I'd like to just first off raise my objection to this process, because I don't think we've been furnished with proper documents, and I think my party leader made this objection this morning. And it was also agreed that this would come before the Transport Committee before any final decision or any vote or otherwise was made. And your own colleagues and the Labour TDs agreed to this, that we would discuss this at the Transport Committee. And it is very sad that we've come in here today to express our opinions on a done deal that nobody outside of AIG and Fine Gael want. For one thing, it is utterly pointless and a mockery of democratic debate. The government have made their decision behind the closed doors in a shrewd media operation, which showed blatant disregard for the Oireachtas and its role in issues of such importance. No matter what anyone says here, the government will seek to sell their shares in Aer Lingus, and the weak and cowed Labour members will go along with it. This, to me, is a sham. To Labour, I would say that they really saw you coming, but in reality, Labour TDs here knew they would sell out and allow this deal. That is why they raised concerns rather than opposition. They hoped they'd get a deal which looked better. To be fair, it does look better than what has been previously offered, but it is still not the right thing to do, and Labour will be punished by the people for this. Have you not realised yet that the spin is only working in Fine Gael's favour, while Labour's subservience and silence is destroying itself from the inside? This is the wrong deal for Ireland, and Labour knows it, but they do not have the courage to act on that knowledge. Fine Gael and IIG are thick as thieves, and your party, having got the runaround, are being trotted out to say how all concerns have been allayed. Aer Lingus is worth infinitely more to Ireland than the $335 million this government will get for cashing in the 25% Fianna Fáil left the state with after their calamitous reign. It brings a secure and consistent connectivity to Ireland, which is vital to any island, but particularly a country which has attracted major multinational companies. A country is only attractive for investment when it boasts the facilities to make doing business there easy and secure. Aer Lingus for years has made Ireland, at the far west of Europe and a vast ocean away from the United States, a place which can be reached without much trouble or planning. It also has a reputation as a quality airline with high consumer satisfaction, which promotes a positive image of Ireland across the world. Irish people have and continue to take pride in Aer Lingus. Thanks now to Fine Gael's desire to sell out as much of the state's assets as possible and Labour's pathetic subservience to them, Aer Lingus is facing into an uncertain 7 years, which very possibly will be its last 7 years, certainly as we know it. It would also be a very uncertain time for the thousands of workers who make their living as part of Aer Lingus or peripheral to Aer Lingus's operations in Ireland. The government says it has gotten assurances from IAG that they will not sell the slots, which was not a major concern due to their strategic importance to the company. They claim to have got a commitment also that the Aer Lingus slots will remain under the company's control for 7 years. On the face of it, that is a stay of execution, which would have never been entered into, but behind that there is a major question about the possibility that those assurances can be enforced or fulfilled. We are talking about the international air travel industry, which is subject to considerable oversight in terms of the rules by which companies operate, and particularly rules with government competition. Do we really believe it is possible for this state, in selling 25% of a company, to hold a major multinational conglomerate to agreements in our interest for 7 years and or after that? IAG are not a charity set up to provide connectivity and jobs to island nations. They are a private profit operation with only two interests: their bottom line and their shareholders, of which Ireland is not one. They do not care about the interests of Ireland, its peoples, or the workers who make up the nearly 4,000 employees of Aer Lingus, which would make up less than 5% of the IAG staff worldwide. Aer Lingus is a small but successful airline. It has weathered the storms of the downturn in air travel in the early 2000s and the economic collapse at the end of that decade. It has shown resilience and served the people of this country well from the 30s up until now, and has provided connectivity and good jobs. Under this deal, sooner or later, that will be a thing of the past, and Aer Lingus as we know it will only be a memory. Aer Lingus has remained such a company despite privatisation due to the state's remaining share, which has represented the interests of Ireland up until now. IAG have track records that shows their interest is not in providing jobs or supporting the countries from which its airlines come. When Iberia Airlines was privatised, it was a good employer. Iberia became part of IAG in 2011. Less than a year later, it announced that 4,500 jobs would be cut from Iberia. That is more than the entire staff of Aer Lingus. This was done without the batting of an eyelid, and IAG carried on regardless, making huge profits for their shareholders at the expense of the Spanish state, who had to help those 4,500 workers to pick up the pieces. Guarantees a company will do this, or that is only believable on the basis that its shareholders will argue for such a practice. No one on IAG's board or among their shareholders will be arguing for the interest of Ireland. I want to quote Willie Walsh, CEO of IAG himself, because he has frequently made it clear what his intentions are for companies like Aer Lingus that has vital slots, especially at Heathrow. This is from an interview with Flight Global in Industry website. It's no secret that we've been interested in BMI, but largely because of its slots positions at Heathrow, rather than the brand, he says. Similarly, when I look at Virgin, what I see are slots at Heathrow. Virgin hasn't got an exciting fleet. What it has got are slots and a network at Heathrow. So if they conclude that what they're selling is, in effect, their slots at Heathrow, then we'd be very interested. This is from the London Independent from last May, where he says, the UK will lose out is that Heathrow will not be able to service to new booming destinations in the developing markets of the Far East, Africa and Latin America. We just won't have the slots at Heathrow. In the Irish Independent in February, he said, there would be some job losses if IAG buys Aer Lingus and enters into the deal. Willie Walsh has also tried to play down the importance of Aer Lingus slots, knowing that this is something which might cause problems for him and Fine Gael when a deal was being done. In the same interview, he said that the high values of slots at the moment did not indicate their value in the future. This is rubbish, as Heathrow is now almost certain to not be developing a third runway. Then slots now are more valuable than ever. The CEO of Aer Lingus, who supports the deal and will be handsomely rewarded for his shares, failed to play down the value of the Heathrow slots when he admitted they were worth nearly 500 million alone, which means that more than a third of the value IAG places on Aer Lingus is for the slots at Heathrow. This clearly shows where IAG interests lie. If you're fooled into thinking his hunger for slots only extended to Virgin. I think have I run out of time there?
No, keep going, okay.
Okay. It is these slots at Heathrow which are so crucial to Aer Lingus' importance to Ireland. They provide excellent connectivity with one of our main sources of trade. It is one of the major reasons why people have a concern for this sell-off after issues of job security. Yet the government will get just over €300 million for its 25% stake, less than the value of Aer Lingus' Heathrow slots alone. If IAG decide to sell Aer Lingus or to wrap up the company, who knows what will happen to these wafer tin assurances the government is...
Deputy Ellis.
Minister, Ireland will in time, under this deal, become like Scotland, utterly ignored by IAG through British Airways, which is purely interested in growing out of Heathrow. As Senator Barrett said last night, we are trying to develop this country, yet we are handing over the national airline to an airline whose track record is not to provide services from Belfast, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Manchester, Birmingham, or any other region of the UK to North America. What hope has Cork or Shannon or other regional airports in that environment? We've been able to use Aer Lingus to support regional airports and the economies surrounding them. This will no longer be the case under IAG, and these communities will suffer for it. The Chambers of Commerce and other bodies from these areas have voiced grave concerns over the IAG bid at the Oireachtas Committee. I also want to deal with the plan by this government to maintain a 1% share in Aer Lingus, which would have certain rights over decisions. This sounds like a good way of maintaining the voice of the Irish state at Aer Lingus, but is faulty for two reasons. This idea is known as a golden share, and it has been shown to be completely illegal under international and European laws governing businesses. In Britain, the government's retained a golden share in BAA, the UK Airports Authority, which operates Heathrow. This was ruled illegal by the European courts in 2003. It was deemed contradictory to the principle of free circulation of capital within the EU. The European Court of Justice also ruled Portugal's golden shares in Energias de Portugal as contrary to the EU law, since it presented an unjustified restriction on free movement of capital. Spain's golden shares Telefónica, Repsol, YPF, Endesa, Argentaria and Tabacalera were also ruled illegal, as were many others. IAG, operating out of Heathrow and controlling former Spanish airline Iberia, would know all too well the problems golden shares face, but that they would see is the government's problems. In an Irish Time poll, a majority of respondents opposed the sell-off of Aer Lingus. The figure of 54% was twice that of those who supported the sale. The people know that Aer Lingus' future is best placed in Ireland, with the state maintaining its interest and arguing for Ireland's needs. It is also faulty, as the real decisions for Aer Lingus will no longer be made at the company, but at the IAG board. I want to also mention the deferred members of the IASS that worked for Aer Lingus. These workers are going to be forced to take a 40% cut to their pension entitlements, facilitated by government legislation. Deputy Costello mentioned this on the radio this morning, and he, known well, he was looking for money from the pension, or from the sale here, and he knows well that, Minister, you ruled that out, and so did Mr Walsh at the Transport Committee, because I put the question to him. He said that was outside of his remit. The deferred pensioners were left out of the expert panel, left out of the conclusion, and now would they be left out in the cold by this deal. The government also opposed amendments to the Social Welfare and Pensions Bill, which would have helped these workers who have been so unfairly treated. This is a cheap sell-off of a vital state asset as an election looms. And let no mistake be made about it. This is a bad deal for Ireland, Aer Lingus and its workers. It will usher in 7 years of uncertainty and struggle for the state in maintaining its connectivity. It will be 7 years of industrial strife and hardship for workers who will be left on the scrap heap, and we will be left in 7 years with an island dependent on the crumbs of a major multinational to provide the much-needed connectivity we have come to depend on. The Labour Party will see the cost of their cowardice, but it will be far too late, just as Fianna Fáil may today see the cost of their agenda in selling off Aer Lingus in the first place. It's clear, Minister, that already Aer Lingus had plans to expand their services and create extra jobs, as well as opening new routes. The new so-called guarantees that have been announced and welcomed by TDs such as John Lyon, Sean Kenny, Joe Costello, Jed Nash, Aidan O'Riordan, they have completely capitulated to all the Northside TDs, the Labour ones, and never mind all those in Cork and Shannon and your own TDs who have the biggest amount of Aer Lingus employees in their constituencies. I asked them, has this deal done any more than the previous one? The same principle applies, that Aer Lingus is a going and profitable concern with plans for expansion that would have created more than the predicted 150 jobs by end 2016 and would rival the so-called net jobs of 635 by 2020 without loss of the jobs that you mentioned, Minister. You mentioned at the press conference the other day something in the region of 50 job losses, but you were a bit vague about that and unsure who would be affected and who they would be. And it just shows you that the government obviously didn't negotiate very hard on that. Job guarantees and promises of no compulsory redundancies is of little consolation to the workforce. What of the future? Is it all right that future employees would have less favourable employment conditions and wages? Will outsourcing take place? With profits of almost 80 million, excluding some once-off loans that were paid back, and passenger numbers at an all-time high of almost 12 million, why should we sell off a going concern that is delivering? Your government admitted that tourism was one of the good stories of recent years. Why would you jeopardise what is already working as well as delivering, particularly over these last hard years? The Heathrow slots are vital to maintain and expand the connectivity to this island and other overseas ones. Minister, why wasn't this brought before the Transport Committee for scrutiny, as requested by all the TDs, including your own? The Labour TDs, I made the request, others made the requests. What did the shareholders benefit in relation to this? Senior managers, directors, or even board members? We haven't seen anything in regards to what remuneration is going to be available to some people as a result of this sale. What happens to the board of Aer Lingus? You mentioned before it'll still act independently, but for how long will that happen? Will that go to perpetuity? I doubt it. How does 1% of a share give a minister a veto for perpetuity? Is the minister going to stand up at one of these board meetings or the meetings of shareholders 7 years or wherever down the road and get up and say, I'm the Minister for Finance or I'm the Minister for Justice. You can't sell off these slots. You can't do this. I think it'd be the laughing stock representing 1%. Anyone that would be put in that position would end up the laughing stock of the place. Minister, Fine Gael ideology is behind this. You support the whole idea of monopolies. You support big business. Anything the state owns or part owns is bad in your mind. This company has survived from the 30s, the 40s, the 50s, through some of the most difficult times and the worst times that this country has ever seen. And we are a rich country. We mightn't be using our resources in the right way, but we are a rich country. And there is no reason why that this company should be sold off. You mentioned 3 areas in terms of how you gauge this. One was, you mentioned the cyclical air industry. In other words, that we have the ups and downs. That is the function of any company to take into account that things can go bad, to work to engineer their finances so that they can address a situation if it gets any way bad. That is the function of any company. So we will have cyclical. This won't be the only time that we've seen issues where the industry has gone up and down and that times have been hard or otherwise. You also mentioned about the other area, you mentioned the European airline industry being fragmented compared to the US. Is that our sole judgment of how we take our judgment on everything that the US does? Europe has some brilliant airlines. They may not all be joined in the same way as the US, but we have some brilliant airlines. That's no way to gauge whether you sell off an airline. And the other area you mentioned was Aer Lingus is no longer our national flag carrier because we only own 25%. It's true we only own 25%. I wish we did own the other 75%, and we weren't at this place. But that doesn't take away from the people's vision and the people who have said that they do not support the selling off of Aer Lingus. The vast majority of people, which you haven't taken into account. You mentioned also about setting up a connectivity fund. And what you said was that this fund would go into the strategic investment fund and that it could go towards building or doing whatever works on harbours, roads, airports. Will this go into the bus services, the ones that you're planning to privatise? Will we see any of this? Will you elaborate on where all these funds are going and what they'll be used for? And if for some reason there is an IAG ends up selling off or otherwise or doing further mergers with other companies, takeovers can happen. We all know this. And any deals that have been done go by the wayside. We've seen it with this government. We've seen it during the commitments that were made at the time of the bin charges in Dublin City Council, where your councillors and Labour councillors made a deal promising that the services, that people, old age pensioners would get waivers, etc., and that they'd be lasting for years and years. That went by the wayside and the whole service was privatised. And it was in with your councillors and Labour at the time. Aer Lingus has survived many things. But Minister, to me, this is a nail in the coffin of Aer Lingus. You should be defending the state's assets. You shouldn't be selling them off. No government should have the right to sell off the state's assets. That is up to the people. It should be put to the people for them to make that decision, if they do, because this has been hard won by the people, by the workers, and people in society. Many, many years of hard work has gone into building up these companies. But at the whim of governments, it seems now, every time a government changes, or we get the Tweedledum, Tweedledee of politics we've had, and we have one government coming in, they privatise a bit here, then the next government comes in, they privatise a little more. And that's what's happened in this state over the last while. This, to me, has damaged this society enormously. And we've seen it in the local services that have been delivered and cut back right across the board. It's happening. Even as we speak, we have services cut left, right and centre. And your government has turned around and said, we're addressing the housing crisis, we're addressing the social issues, and yet we have, by Focus the other day, telling us there are 70 families, new families every month now, appearing in homelessness. You know, since the death of Jonathan Curry and all the talk of we were going to do this and the spin of the 3.8 billion, and you spun it out that many times, I lost count, because it was the funds were just totally ridiculous. Some of the sums that were being spilled out, and it was constantly spun out. But to me, this is one of the worst things in my mind: selling off state assets, selling off what the people of this country worked hard to build up. This has belonged to the state. It's not belonged to you. It's not belonged to the government, whether it's Fine Gael or Labour. You have taken this on board yourselves to do this. And you can push this through, but it will come back to haunt us. And I'm fairly sure it will come back to haunt us, because IAG, Louis Walsh and people like that have no interest in the connectivity in this country. They have the interest of the shareholders, their own interests at heart. But the people who really matter when it comes to their own country are the people here, the ordinary people who care. And you are going against their wishes. That's the way I see it, Minister. Thank you.